I had been sitting with Matthew for 3 days in the hospital before he finally spoke. His voice was barely more than a whisper, rough from disuse, but every word weighed heavy as stone. The psychologist was there too, sitting cross-legged on a chair, speaking softly so as not to scare him. "Can you tell us what happened that night?" she asked. Matthew's small hands twisted the teddy bear against his chest. His eyes darted to me, then back to the floor. He didn't nod, didn't shake his head. He just started talking, slow, careful, as though each word had to be pushed through a locked door. "It was raining," he said, really loud, like the sky was throwing rocks on the roof. "Dad let me stay up late, 'cause the thunder made me jump. I felt my breath catch." Even then, Daniel had tried to shield his son from fear, turning storms into excuses for togetherness. Matthew's voice wavered. "I was building my Lego tower in my room. Dad was watching me and smiling, but he kept looking at the door like he was waiting for someone." He pressed his face into the bear's fur for a moment, then peeked back out. Then the doorbell rang. It rang a lot. Ding, 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 ding. He mimicked the sound, and his shoulders flinched with the memory. Dad went to the peephole. His face looked wrong. Not like my dad's face. Tight. Scared. He turned around really fast, came to me, and said, "Hide and hum." I frowned, confused. "Hide and hum?" Matthew nodded. "That's what he always told me. If something scary happened, I was supposed to crawl under the bed and hum our song, quiet, so only I could hear it. So I did." His small hands trembled as he mimed crawling. Dad pushed me quick, pulled the blanket so no one could see. He whispered, "Don't come out. No matter what, I'll call you when it's safe." My throat tightened. Daniel had prepared his son with a secret code, something he must have invented just in case. It had saved Matthew's life. Matthew's voice dropped lower. I peeked through a crack in the blanket. I saw Dad open the door. A woman came in and a manual. The psychologist leaned closer. "Do you know the woman?" Matthew's fingers tightened on the bear. "She used to come before. She made Dad sad. Her name was Lydia." The name hit me like a strike of cold water. Lydia, Daniel's ex-wife. I had hoped never to hear her name in our lives again. "She wasn't alone," Matthew continued. "The man was tall, taller than Dad. He had a jacket that dripped water on the floor. His face was mean. He didn't talk much." Matthew shifted in the bed, eyes glassy. "Lydia was yelling. She asked Dad for money. She said he owed her. Dad told her no. He said she had to leave." His lip quivered. Then the tall man pushed him. The words broke the room's air in half. I gripped the arms of my chair. Matthew sniffled. Dad hit the table corner. It made a bang sound. He fell down. He didn't get up. His small voice cracked. There was red water under him. He buried his face into the bear again. I reached out, stroking his hair, my own tears blurring the room. Matthew whispered into the fur, muffled but clear enough. Dad looked at me, just for a second. He didn't say words, but his lips moved. Then Lydia saw. She ran over and put a blanket on him. She was talking fast. The man helped. They dragged him. The boy's voice grew thin. I heard the door chime when they opened it. Then the garage door rumbled loud. They pulled him out. His hands mimed dragging. I wanted to go out. I wanted to help. But I remembered what Dad said. Hide and hum. So I stayed. He went quiet for a long while. The psychologist didn't press. I thought he was done. But then his hand squeezed the plastic water bottle he still clung to. The crinkle cut through the silence. There was another sound. He whispered. Plastic wheels. Like my toy truck, rolling. But heavy. Too heavy. They made a bump sound on the porch. His eyes widened. That's when I knew Dad wasn't coming back in. Silence filled the hospital room. The monitor beeped softly. The 4-bag dripped. The night rain tapped the window. My heart felt as though it had stopped, listening to the words my grandson had carried in silence for 2 weeks. I held him close, kissing his damp hair. You were so brave, Matthew. So brave, but inside, I felt only a hollow ache. The picture was forming now, clearer and crueler. Lydia, her debts, the stranger's shove, the dragged blanket, the sound of wheels, and my son, my Daniel, had looked at his boy one last time before darkness claimed him. Matthew clutched the bear tighter. I hummed the whole night, he whispered, just like Dad said, and I realized that the soft scraping sound under the bed, the plastic bottle rocking back and forth when I first entered, wasn't just chance. It was the echo of those wheels in his memory, the memory that would haunt us both forever. The hospital had become a place where time moved strangely, too fast when doctors entered with news, too slow when silence stretched across the boys' room. I sat by Matthew's bedside, my shawl wrapped tight, replaying his story over and over until it began to stitch into something bigger. Lydia. A stranger. Demands for money. A storm. Wheels rolling into the night, but one memory of my own surfaced then, sharper than all the rest. Years ago, Daniel had stopped by my house with a folder in his hands. He was proud, smiling the way he always did when he thought he'd done something responsible. "Mom," he had said, "I bought life insurance. If anything happens, Matthew and Lydia will be okay." At the time, it sounded thoughtful, admirable even. He was building a future, trying to secure his family. But now the thought of Lydia's name on that paper chilled me to the bone. The next morning, I told the detective. "Check his insurance," I said. "He had a policy. I'm sure of it." The detective tilted his head, considering, and sent a young officer with me back to Daniel's house. The place was still cordoned off with yellow tape. Walking through that door again felt like stepping back into a nightmare. But I pushed myself forward, straight into Daniel's study. The desk drawers gave way with a squeak. Paperwork, bills, old receipts, and then the blue folder I remembered, wedged between files of tax forms. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. Inside was the policy. The beneficiary line was exactly as I feared. Lydia Carson. My breath caught. She was still listed, despite the divorce. But then another sheet slipped out, one stapled to the back. A change request form. My son had filled it out, requesting Matthew as the new beneficiary. The date, 1 month before he disappeared. At the bottom, the insurer's stamp. Pending, awaiting policyholder's signature confirmation. He had started the process, but he hadn't finished it. He never signed. I sank into his chair, the folder heavy in my lap. All at once, the storm-twisted puzzle snapped into focus. Lydia had debts. She had a motive. And she knew the policy was still in her name. Unless Daniel got the chance to sign that paper. The officer standing behind me cleared his throat. "That's a strong lead," he said. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to answer. Later that afternoon, the detective returned with more. "We've pulled text records," he said. "Messages to your son in the weeks before the storm." He slid a sheet across the table. I didn't want to read them, but my eyes betrayed me. "You owe me, Dan. You don't just get to walk away. 2 weeks. That's all you have. If you don't pay, I'll come to the house." The words burned into my mind. The date matched perfectly. 2 weeks before Daniel went silent. The exact length of time Matthew had endured alone in that house. She gave him a deadline. I whispered. And when he couldn't meet it, she came. The detective's face was grim. "Storm night lines up exactly. Truck was sighted then. And now we've got motive. Insurance money." I clutched the folder tighter. Daniel had tried to protect Matthew. He had even tried to correct his mistake, to erase Lydia's name from that paper. But the form sat unfinished, unsigned. And in that unfinished space, she had found her opportunity. The stakes of it all crashed down on me. This wasn't just about debt collectors or a bad temper. Lydia had been staring at a payout that could clear everything she owed, and more. My son's life reduced to numbers on a policy. A signature he never had time to scrawl. I looked back at the detective, my voice steadier than I felt. "She killed him for money." He didn't argue. He only nodded, and in that nod, I felt the truth settle heavy on my chest. Storms, debts, deadlines, and one unsigned line on a form. That was all it had taken for Lydia to turn from a broken ex-wife into something much darker. And now, I thought, staring at the folder's cold print, justice would have to begin with paper. I never thought I'd find myself studying grainy traffic footage. But there I was, hunched in a precinct briefing room with a detective pointing at a monitor. The screen flickered, showing time-stamped clips stitched together like a puzzle. There, the detective said, tapping the glass. A truck rolled across the frame, boxy, white, with condensation curling from the rear vents. Not just a delivery van. A refrigerated rental. He paused the video. This model's used for transporting perishables. Rented by the day. But look at the timing. Storm night. Exactly when your neighbor heard the engine idling outside your son's house. I leaned closer, heart hammering. The image was blurred by rain, but I could see enough. The truck waited too long, headlights low, engine running. Then it pulled away slowly, disappearing into the dark. They followed its route across several cameras. One caught it 2 blocks away, another further down a main road. And then, nothing. A gap. The truck should have been visible at the next intersection, but it vanished. Cameras don't just stop working, I said. Not usually, the detective agreed. He zoomed out, pointing at a shaded corner on the city map. But see this? Old Canning Depot. Long abandoned. Security cameras in that district haven't worked for years. If someone wanted to avoid being seen, that's exactly where they'd go. The word depot felt heavy in my chest. An industrial graveyard. The kind of place where forgotten things are left to rot. 2 days later, the search teams combed the depot. I was not allowed inside, but I stood at the chain-link fence watching them move with flashlights and cameras, their shadows shifting like restless spirits. Hours later, one of the techs emerged with a heavy bundle sealed in evidence bags. The detective showed me photographs. Tie-down straps, he explained, used to secure cargo. But these aren't just ordinary marks. The images revealed fibers clinging to the metal teeth of the straps. Faint, but visible. Short tufts of carpet, beige with a darker backing. They matched the dimensions of a living room rug. The detective said, voice grave. Same size as the one missing from your son's house. I closed my eyes, the image flooding back. That pale outline on Daniel's floor, the rug ripped away, and now its fibers clung to a truck's restraints, like silent witnesses screaming the truth. The weight of it sank deep. They hadn't just dragged him out in the storm. They had wrapped him in the rug from his own home, strapped him down like cargo, and driven him into darkness, as if erasing him from his house wasn't enough. They had tried to erase him from the world. The next link came in the unlikeliest way. A neighbor, Mrs. Rose again, mentioned a man she'd seen hanging around the storage units down the road. Big fellow, she said, wrinkling her nose. Looked rough, leather jacket, scar on his face. He was arguing with the clerk about money. That sent the police to the storage facility. The clerk, a thin young man with nervous eyes, at first said little, but under quiet pressure, he admitted the stranger had pawned something there, a watch, not just any watch. When the detective slid the pawn ticket across the table, my heart lurched. The description matched the silver wristwatch Daniel wore every day, the one I'd given him on his 30th birthday. A gift engraved with time is ours. Love, Mom. The stranger had pawned it for cash, leaving a trail he must have thought invisible. Whoever this man is, the detective said, he's not just an accomplice. He handled your son's belongings. He sold them. That puts him in the house and in the truck. They traced the ticket back through the system. It led to a name, Aaron Holt, a drifter with a history of petty theft, loan shark connections, and an address that shifted as often as the wind. I felt bow rise in my throat. This was the tall man Matthew had described, the shadow behind Lydia that stormy night. Later that evening, I sat alone in the hospital waiting room. The vending machine hummed beside me, and the taste of lukewarm coffee clung bitter on my tongue. The evidence spun in my mind. The truck, the rug fibers, the watch, each one a piece, each one undeniable. I looked toward Matthew's room. Through the glass, I saw him asleep, his bear tucked under his arm, his small hand still resting on that empty bottle like a lifeline. I whispered to myself, though no one else could hear, "We're getting closer, Daniel. We're finding them." And in the stillness of that hospital corridor, I felt for the first time that the walls of silence around the truth were beginning to crack. The truck had vanished that night, but its shadow was still here, and soon the men who drove it would have nowhere left to hide. The precinct interrogation room looked as gray and lifeless as the men who sat inside it. On one side of the table was Aaron Holt, the scarred man my grandson had described, the taller shadow who had loomed in Daniel's doorway that night. He tried to act indifferent, arms folded, eyes shifting between the detectives and the mirrored glass, but the evidence piled in front of him told a different story. The detective laid out the photographs one by one. The tie-down straps with carpet fibers, the pawn ticket for Daniel's engraved watch, the lab sheet showing residues flushed from the kitchen drain, iron-rich, unmistakable traces that no amount of bleach could erase. "You can keep playing dumb," the detective said calmly, "but we have you in Daniel Carson's house. We have you helping Lydia remove his body. And we have you pawning his watch the very next day." Aaron's jaw twitched. He looked at the mirror, knowing we were behind it, then back down at the table. His silence lasted a long minute before he exhaled hard, like air leaking from a punctured tire. "Fine," he muttered. "But you don't know the whole thing. That woman set this up. I didn't come up with it." The detectives didn't press too fast. They let him unravel. "She said it was supposed to be simple," Aaron continued, his voice low, defensive. "An accident, that's what she told me. She wanted to stage it, said if Daniel slipped and hit his head, no one would question it. She could file the insurance claim and pay me for helping keep it quiet." He rubbed his temple. But he fought back. He wouldn't play along, so I shoved him harder. "That part, that's on me." The words chilled me. Lydia had imagined a scheme so cold it twisted my stomach, using a staged fall to collect on the policy. But greed and desperation had no brakes, and Aaron's shove had turned fantasy into murder. The detectives exchanged a glance. They had what they needed. But Aaron wasn't finished. She panicked, started yelling that we had to get rid of him fast, wrapped him in the rug, told me to tie it down. She drove the truck to the depot. I didn't want the body in my car, so I went along. What was I supposed to do? "You were supposed to walk away," the detective said flatly. "Instead, you strapped a man's body like freight." Aaron's eyes dropped. He had flipped himself, and he knew it. The police set up a sting the next day. Lydia thought she was meeting Aaron to collect forged paperwork, documents that would help her pose Daniel's death as an accident and smooth the payout. What she didn't know was that the entire meeting was wired. She arrived at the cafe in a black coat, sunglasses covering her eyes, though the day was overcast. She slid into the booth across from Aaron, unaware of the microphones hidden in the salt shaker, the pen clipped to his pocket. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice taut, hurried. Aaron nodded, playing his part. "Got the papers right here. Just need your signature. Once you file, the money's yours." Her face tightened. "It has to go fast. The company can't find out Daniel was trying to change the beneficiary. If they know he wanted Matthew instead of me." She stopped, biting down on her lip. Too late. The words were already recorded. Detectives at the next table didn't even need to wait. They moved in, flashing badges, pulling her from the booth. Her sunglasses clattered to the floor as she shouted, "You can't prove anything. He was mine before he ever left me. That money is mine." Her voice echoed in the cafe, sending customers scattering. And just like that, the pretense of innocence shattered. Back at the station, the evidence fit together with brutal clarity. The drain trap residue proved Daniel's blood had been washed down. The rug fibers in the truck straps showed how his body had been moved. The pawned watch placed Aaron inside the crime. And Lydia's own slip about the pending beneficiary change proved intent beyond doubt. She knew Daniel had tried to cut her out. She just acted before he could. When the charges were read, first-degree murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy, Lydia slumped in her chair, eyes dull. Aaron offered a lighter sentence for cooperation, signed his confession with a shaking hand. I sat in the hallway outside, clutching my shawl tight around my shoulders. The words filtered through the door, but I didn't need to hear them to know what they meant. My son was gone, stolen by greed and betrayal. But now, at least, the shadows had names. The lies had cracks, and justice had teeth. When the officers led Lydia past me in handcuffs, she wouldn't meet my eyes. I watched her go, feeling anger, grief, and a hollow pity all at once. She had chosen death over love, money over her own son's future, and in the end, it hadn't even saved her. I closed my eyes, whispering into the quiet of the corridor. Daniel, it's done. They can't hurt Matthew anymore. They can't hurt you again. But even with the arrests, the truth carried no triumph, only the heavy stillness of a storm that had finally spent itself. The morgue was colder than I imagined, though I don't know what I expected. The air smelled faintly of chemicals, sterile and sharp, a place designed to strip death of its chaos and leave only silence. A young officer guided me down a narrow corridor, his voice low and careful, but I barely heard him. My ears were ringing with a single thought. I have to see him. I have to know. Inside the identification room, a gurney waited beneath harsh fluorescent lights. A white sheet covered the body, tucked neat around the edges. My hands shook as the attendant folded it back. There he was, Daniel, pale, lips slack, eyes closed as though sleep had carried him too far. His thick brows, his nose, the faint scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 15. All of it was still there, still my boy, still my son. My knees buckled, and I gripped the metal rail to keep from collapsing. A sound escaped my throat, low and broken, not quite a scream, not quite a sob. My son, I whispered, the words tearing themselves out of me. I wanted to touch him, to smooth his hair like I had when he was small. But my hand hovered above his cheek and fell away. The chill of the room told me what I already knew. He would never answer me again. The officer rested a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Take your time, he said, but there was no time. Only grief, endless and raw. That night, back at the hospital, Matthew was asleep, his teddy bear pressed to his chest. I sat by his bed, staring at his small face, wondering how much of this truth he could ever be told. He had already seen more than any child should. A week later, the detectives called about preparing Matthew's testimony. The very word made my stomach twist. To sit my grandson in a courtroom, to ask him to relive the storm and the shove and his father's fall, it felt unbearable. I asked the therapist, a gentle woman with kind eyes, what to do. She listened, nodding slowly, then said, children in trauma often respond better through play or indirect expression. Forcing him into a courtroom could reopen the wound. A recorded interview, done in a safe environment, might be enough. It lets him share his truth without being crushed by the process. Her voice was calm, but her words left me trembling. To protect Matthew meant keeping him from that witness stand, but it also meant trusting the system to believe him without seeing his tears in person. I looked at the boy, coloring quietly at a table in the therapy room, his hand tight around a crayon, his drawings filled with storm clouds and stick figures. I made my choice then. Record him, I told the therapist. Let him speak where he feels safe. I won't let him go through more than he already has. The courts moved forward, but I turned my energy to something else. Matthew's future. The paperwork for custody was swift, the judge understanding of the circumstances. Within weeks, it was decided. Matthew would live with me. I sold Daniel's house. I couldn't bear the thought of Matthew walking those halls again, smelling bleach in the kitchen, seeing the missing rug in the living room. We moved back to my small town, to my quiet house with its garden and creaking porch swing. Every day, I sat with Matthew in therapy. Some days he spoke a word or two. Some days he said nothing, just held the bottle cap between his fingers like a talisman. And every night, I whispered the same promise as he drifted to sleep. Grandma's here. You're safe now. I'll carry this for both of us. In the stillness of those nights, grief pressed heavy on my chest. But beneath it flickered something else. Resolve. I had lost my son, but I still had his son, and I would not let silence or shadows take him too. The trial ended weeks ago, but some nights I still sit awake, listening to the hush of my small town street. The porch boards creak beneath my chair as I rock slowly, the night air cool against my face. The garden hums with crickets, the world moving on. Inside, Matthew sleeps in his new room, his teddy bear always tucked beneath his chin. He still startles at storms, but he no longer hums himself to sleep. He lets me do that. I think often about the moment I first heard that scrape under his bed, the sound that led me to the truth. Under a bed, I found fear, but I also found a reason to wake up every morning. My son is gone, but his son remains, and he needs more than my grief. He needs my strength. The names and places in this story have been changed to protect those involved, but the lessons remain. Be vigilant with custody transitions. Never ignore the paper trails, wills, insurance, accounts, because what is left undone can open doors to darkness. And teach your children a code phrase, something only you share. It may feel unnecessary until the day it saves them. I don't know if grief ever lessens. What I do know is that silence can be broken and fear can be faced. Each morning, when Matthew looks at me, there's a flicker of trust in his eyes that wasn't there before. It's enough. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. And tonight, before you turn off the light, hug someone you love. You never know how much one moment can mean until it's gone. I stand in my son's doorway with my hand still on the knob, listening. The house is too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your eardrums. A hallway nightlight throws a weak orange pool across the floor. I whisper his name, then my grandson's, and the sound feels small in the dark. The living room is a mess. The sofa is crooked, the throw rug buckled like a wave. A mug lies in pieces by the coffee table, and a brown stain has dried around it like a map. I step carefully, my shoes whispering over the floor. I don't call out again. Something about this silence says don't. I click my phone's flashlight on. The thin white beam skims the walls, pictures, door frames, dust motes. It shakes in my hand no matter how hard I tell myself to be calm. The kitchen smells faintly of bleach and damp. An empty water jug has rolled into the corner. The refrigerator hums like it's trying to pretend nothing is wrong. Upstairs, the carpet swallows my steps. My son's office is neat, almost staged, chair pushed in, laptop closed, a pen aligned with the edge of a pad. His bedroom looks slept in but untouched. A made bed, a shirt tossed over a chair, as if he might walk in and scold me for snooping. He does not. I stop at my grandson's door. The sticker with his name is peeling from the wood. Inside, the room smells like crayons and dust and a boy who used to laugh here. Lego towers lean on the dresser. A small blue backpack hangs from the bedpost, mouth open as if it tried to speak and couldn't. That's when I hear it. A tiny scrape. Plastic against wood. I freeze. The beam from my phone trembles across the race car sheets, the scattered blocks, the shadowed gap beneath the bed frame. Another small sound, lighter than a breath, smaller than a word. The hair along my arms rises. Matthew? My voice is barely there. Nothing answers. Then again, scrape. A bottle rolling, slow, reluctant, like it has reached a wall and rocked back. My knees want to fold. I make myself move backward until my shoulder blades touch the door. I keep the light on the floor and pull in air that doesn't seem to want to come. I dial with clumsy fingers. It takes me 2 tries to hit the right numbers. The emergency operator asks what's wrong. My son is missing, I say, too fast. His house is open. Something. I swallow. Something is moving under my grandson's bed. The minutes after that stretch like rubber. Red and blue light washes the walls downstairs. Voices, quick and clipped, rise and fall. I lead the officers up with my phone light and a hand that won't stop shaking. In the doorway, I point without looking away from the dark under the bed. A young officer drops to one knee. Police, he says, steady. If someone's under there, we're here to help. Silence. The other officer takes the far leg of the frame. On 3, he says. 1, 2, they lift. The bed rises just enough to let the shadows peel back. My light finds a small body curled tight against the slats, knees pulled to chest, face slick with sweat and dust. My grandson blinks into the glare like it hurts him. In one hand, he clutches an empty water bottle so hard the plastic caves under his fingers. Matthew, I breathe, and my voice breaks in the middle. I drop to the floor. My palm finds his hair, damp and hot. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He holds the bottle as if it is the only thing that kept him here. The officers lower the bed aside and keep their voices calm, careful. The way people speak in churches. One checks his pulse and nods. He's alive, he says gently. Dehydrated, in shock. Where's my son? I ask the room, the air, the quiet. No one answers. Downstairs, the siren coughs to life again. The house seems to exhale. I'm still on my knees, my breath stuttering. When the officer meets my eyes and says, "Ma'am, we'll get him to the hospital. We need to call this in." I brush the dust from my grandson's cheek. He looks past me, through me, to someplace I cannot see. The bottle turns once in his hand and stops. Hard cut. I lost my son for 3 weeks. What I found waiting under his bed still terrifies me. This is how a hidden debt turned into a death. I always called Daniel on Sunday evenings. It was our rhythm. He'd tell me about work, what Matthew had built with his Legos that week, and whether he'd managed to get through the laundry pile. Sometimes I'd hear my grandson in the background, his little voice calling out to ask if Grandma could come visit soon. It was ordinary, steady, something I could count on. 2 weeks ago, that rhythm broke. The first call rang and rang, then dropped into voicemail. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just checking in. Call me back." I set the phone down, convincing myself he was busy, maybe already asleep, but by the next morning, no message had come. I tried again. And again. Morning, lunch hour, late at night when I knew Matthew should be in bed. Every time. Silence. Each attempt felt heavier than the last. I left voicemails with my voice cracking in places I hoped he wouldn't notice. "Daniel, are you okay? Please call me." By the 4th day, I was pacing the kitchen in my small house. The kettle whistled, and I didn't hear it until water spilled over. My routines, watering the garden, sitting by the window with my crossword, turned hollow without the anchor of his voice. I lived in a town where neighbors still waved from their porches and the church bells marked every hour. But all that familiarity couldn't reach the knot tightening in my chest. I told myself reasons. Maybe his phone had broken. Maybe he'd taken Matthew camping where service was bad. Maybe work had swallowed him up again. Those late projects he always grumbled about. But Daniel wasn't careless, and he wasn't thoughtless. He never went more than a few days without checking in, even if it was just a short text. On the 7th day, I dialed his landline. The ring echoed through the receiver, flat and endless, until I hung up. My hands trembled as I opened the messaging app kids use and wrote to Matthew instead. "Sweetie, it's Grandma. Tell Daddy to call me." I watched the screen, waiting for the little read check mark. Nothing. Hours passed. Still nothing. I began reaching out. Co-workers, friends, neighbors. One colleague told me he thought Daniel had taken some time off. Another friend admitted they hadn't spoken in weeks. Each answer only deepened the void. The people who should have known where he was had no clue. By the 10th day, my nights blurred into mornings. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing with scenarios I didn't want to imagine. An accident, a break-in, a decision to leave everything behind. But no, Daniel would never abandon Matthew. My grandson was his whole world. I pressed the old family photo on my dresser, the one of Daniel holding Matthew at the county fair, both of them grinning with cotton candy stuck to their faces. I told myself, he wouldn't leave that boy. Not ever. On the 12th day, I called a neighbor across the street from his gated community. She hesitated, then said she'd noticed something strange the night of a heavy storm. A light flickered on in Daniel's house, then went off again. She thought little of it at the time, but now her voice quivered as she told me. That detail drilled into my mind, sharp and cold. A light in the storm, then darkness. By the 14th day, I couldn't sit still anymore. My hands wouldn't hold still for knitting. My eyes couldn't follow words on a page. I folded clothes that didn't need folding, set the table for meals I didn't eat. Every action was a disguise for waiting, and I couldn't bear it. I packed a small bag, one change of clothes, my shawl, a thermos of tea. I locked my front door and walked to the bus station before dawn. The ticket felt damp in my sweaty hand. On the bus, the countryside slid by in gray blurs. I kept my forehead against the cool window, watching farmhouses and fields pass like ghosts. Not once did I close my eyes. Every bump in the road made my stomach jump. 3 hours to Chicago. 3 hours to Daniel's house. 3 hours to answers, or to a truth I wasn't ready to face. With every mile, the knot in my chest pulled tighter, until I wondered if I'd even be able to breathe by the time I reached his door. The gated community where Daniel lived was one I knew well. I had walked those sidewalks many times, carrying pies or birthday gifts, listening to my grandson chatter beside me. That evening, though, it felt like a movie set. Familiar outlines with all the warmth stripped away. The porch lights glowed faintly, but no one else was outside. The world seemed to be holding its breath. I climbed the steps and knocked. First a polite tap, then harder, my knuckles stinging against the wood. Daniel? Matthew? My voice quivered. Then in the October air, silence answered. I tried the knob, not expecting it to turn. It did. The door creaked open like it hadn't been oiled in months. That alone was wrong. Daniel was careful, always locking doors, double-checking windows. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not food gone bad. Something sharper, bleach threaded with dampness, like someone had scrubbed the house but left it to sour. Inside, the living room told its own story. The sofa was shoved out of line with the rug, angled as if someone had stumbled into it. A lamp leaned sideways, its shade crooked. On the floor, a mug lay shattered, porcelain pieces scattered wide. A dark stain, coffee, maybe, had seeped into the fibers, now dried into a brittle crust. I stepped over the shards, heart pounding, afraid even the crunch of porcelain might shatter whatever fragile truth still hung in the air. My eyes tracked the rug's outline. A square of lighter carpet stood out, the exact size of the rug that should have been there. It hadn't been rolled up neatly. It was gone. Removed. The kitchen was worse. The water cooler jug lay on its side, empty. Dozens of plastic bottles were strewn across the linoleum, caps off, drained dry. They rolled when I stepped, clinking hollowly. I bent down and picked one up. It smelled faintly metallic inside, not like fresh water. My hand trembled as I set it back down. The counters were wiped too clean. No crumbs, no dishes. The trash can was empty, liner missing. Daniel wasn't a neat freak. He lived like a man with an 8-year-old, messy but functional. This was deliberate. I opened the window above the sink. The latch resisted. Scratches etched into the metal glinted under the streetlight outside, as though someone had forced it open with a tool. The lock barely clicked back into place. Upstairs, the quiet thickened. My shoes sank into the carpet, muffling each step. In Daniel's office, his chair was pushed perfectly into the desk. His laptop was closed, no power light blinking. The router beside it was dark, unplugged. I bent down, staring at the cord lying loose on the floor. Daniel used to joke that Matthew's cartoons would never load if the Wi-Fi dropped. He would never leave it unplugged for days. In his bedroom, the sheets were stretched tight, tucked as if for inspection. Too neat. Daniel always left the blanket rumpled, one corner kicked aside. I opened the closet. His work shirts hung in order, but a space gaped between hangers where a jacket should have been. Each detail piled onto the last. The missing rug, the bottles, the scratched latch, the dead router. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. My stomach twisted as if it already knew the picture they made. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the gloom of the living room. The bleach scent rose from the carpet, fighting against the smell of old coffee. I could almost see it. Someone scrubbing hard, dousing the fibers, dragging away the rug that held too much of something they couldn't leave behind. My hand closed on the banister, cold and smooth. The words came uninvited, rising from a place in me I didn't want to acknowledge. Someone washed what they couldn't erase. My chest tightened. My knees wobbled, and I gripped the rail until my knuckles whitened. I wanted to scream for Daniel, to demand an answer from the walls. Instead, the only sound was the faint drip of water from somewhere unseen, echoing through the hollow house. And in that silence, I understood. I wasn't just standing in my son's home. I was standing in the middle of a crime scene. I hadn't meant to climb the stairs again. My legs carried me there on their own, pulled toward the door with the peeling sticker that spelled my grandson's name. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered, every shadow stretched and breathing. When I pushed the door open, the smell of crayons and dust hit me. The night light threw a pale glow across the carpet, illuminating the small bed with its race car sheets, the Lego sets lined on the dresser. All of it looked frozen in time, like a snapshot of a boy's life paused mid-laugh. Then came the scrape, a thin, dragging sound against wood. I stopped breathing. My hand clenched the doorframe so hard I felt the grain dig into my palm. Another scrape, plastic rolling, bumping, then settling. Matthew? My voice cracked in the middle. Nothing. I lowered the flashlight toward the narrow dark beneath the bed frame. My heart pounded so loud it drowned the silence. I wanted to kneel, to look, but my knees wouldn't bend. My body refused. I backed into the hall, fumbling for my phone. My fingers slipped across the screen. Twice I misdialed before I managed the right numbers. Emergency services, the operator said. My son is missing, I stammered. And there's something under my grandson's bed. They told me to wait. 10 minutes, they said. 10 minutes stretched into forever. The house groaned around me, settling as if it wanted to keep its secrets. At last, the red and blue lights splashed against the windows. Doors slammed. Heavy boots hit the floorboards. Relief nearly buckled me, but dread kept me upright as I led the officers upstairs. The younger one knelt by the bed. His flashlight beam pierced the shadows. His partner stood ready, hand on the frame. Is anyone under there? The younger one called. His voice was steady, even gentle. Silence thickened the room. My breath fogged the air. On 3, the other officer said. 1, 2, they lifted. The bed scraped against the floor, and the shadows peeled away. And there he was, Matthew, curled tight as a shell, his knees pressed into his chest, his little hands gripping a crushed plastic bottle. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his shirt stained with sweat. His eyes were open, too wide, too unblinking, staring straight through the beam of light. Dear God, I whispered. My knees hit the carpet. I reached out, but stopped inches from touching him. My hands shook too hard, afraid that if I brushed him, he might vanish like a dream. He's alive, the officer said softly, checking his pulse. Dehydrated, but alive. I tried to smile, tried to breathe, but the sound that left me was closer to a sob. Matthew, Grandma's here, I whispered. He didn't answer. His eyes tracked nothing, fixed on a space far beyond the room. The bottle in his hand creaked as he squeezed it tighter. One officer crouched to meet his gaze. "Hey, buddy. Can you hear me?" Did something happen that night? For the first time, Matthew moved. Not his eyes, not his lips, just his hand. He squeezed the bottle once, twice. The sound of crushed plastic was small, almost lost in the heavy silence. But to me, it was deafening. A signal, a warning, a story he couldn't yet speak. And I knew then, whatever had happened in this house, my grandson had lived it and carried it inside him like a shadow that would not let go. The ride to the hospital blurred into streaks of red and blue. I sat in the back of the patrol car, Matthew wrapped in a thin blanket, his small frame stiff against me. He hadn't said a word. His eyes were wide, unblinking, as though they were still staring at something only he could see. The empty water bottle remained clenched in his hand, crinkling whenever his fingers twitched. In the emergency room, nurses swept him away from my arms. I followed close, heart hammering, refusing to let him out of sight. The fluorescent lights stung my eyes. Machines beeped, papers shuffled, shoes squeaked on tile. Words floated past me like fragments. Dehydration shock, no signs of external injury. A doctor, middle-aged with a weary expression, approached. "He's stable," he said. "Malnourished, severely dehydrated, but no fractures or visible wounds. His silence is psychological. Trauma, most likely." His eyes softened. "He needs time. Right now, the safest thing for him is rest, fluids, and familiarity." I nodded, though my chest ached with the weight of what he didn't say. Whatever had silenced my grandson was not a small thing. They let me sit by his bed once the 4 was in place. His little arm looked thinner than it should, a clear tube taped gently against his skin. I reached for his free hand, but he didn't look at me. His gaze stayed fixed on the ceiling. The bottle, still there, rested on the sheets. His fingers curled around the cap as though it anchored him to this world. When the attending asked him about what happened, he didn't move. But when the words "front door" slipped into the conversation, the bottle gave a sharp crinkle. His fingers squeezed down hard, knuckles whitening. My breath caught. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. "Matthew," I whispered, leaning closer. "Is it the front door? Did something happen there?" His eyes flicked toward me for the briefest second, then away. Another squeeze on the bottle. Twice this time. The doctor exchanged a look with a nurse. "He's responding non-verbally. That's a good sign," he murmured, but his voice carried a thread of unease. Later that night, a social worker arrived, calm-voiced and kind, her badge swinging on a lanyard. She sat across from me, speaking softly about procedures, about trauma care. "Children process in fragments," she said. "Pushing too hard can make them retreat further. He needs patience, safety, consistency." I told her I wasn't leaving. "Not tonight, not tomorrow." She placed a hand on my arm and nodded, as if she already knew what my answer would be. A pediatric psychologist followed. She tried questions, soft and simple, crouching low so her eyes were level with Matthew's. "Do you feel safe here? Can you nod for me?" Silence. "Can you squeeze Grandma's hand if you hear me?" Nothing, until her phrasing shifted. "Were you scared at the door?" Crinkle. The bottle cap crushed under his fist again. The psychologist looked at me. "That's his signal. He's telling us something, but it will take time before he can put it into words." Her words hung heavy. Time. How much time? My son was gone. My grandson locked inside his silence, and every day stretched like a punishment. But looking at him, his thin shoulders under the blanket, his lips parted in shallow breaths, I knew leaving was not an option. That night, when the ward quieted and most of the staff moved to other patients, I pulled my chair closer to his bed. My hand hovered just above his hair, then rested gently. His eyes stayed open, still fixed on some invisible horizon. But I whispered anyway, "Grandma's here, Matthew. I'm not going anywhere. Not until you're ready to tell me what happened." The bottle gave the faintest squeak as his fingers shifted, like an echo of agreement. And though my heart was breaking, I promised myself I would sit through every silence until his voice returned. The next morning, I went back to Daniel's house with the detectives. I didn't want to step inside again. The smell of bleach clung to my memory. But something in me needed answers more than it needed rest. The forensics team moved quietly, their gloves snapping, their tools clicking. I hovered near the kitchen door, watching, afraid to breathe too loudly. My eyes wandered the space, picking up details I'd missed the night before. Upstairs, in the bathroom, I paused. On the sink were 2 toothbrushes in the cup, Daniel's blue one and Matthew's smaller red one with a cartoon rocket on the handle. But when I reached for the towel rack, only a single towel hung there. The second hook was bare, dust outlining where another towel should have been. I stood frozen, staring. If both toothbrushes had been used, why only one towel? My son was tidy but not obsessive. He never stripped linens away, unless there was a reason. My stomach twisted. The missing towel wasn't laundry. It was absence. It had been taken. I whispered aloud without meaning to. Something happened here, downstairs. I found the lead detective and told him. He raised an eyebrow but nodded for the text to note it. It wasn't much, but it was a thread. And threads matter when everything else has been scrubbed away. That afternoon, I knocked on neighbors' doors, clutching my shawl like it could steady me. Most gave polite smiles, pity in their eyes, but no answers. Then I found Mrs. Rose across the street, leaning on her cane. She lowered her voice, as if afraid of being overheard. The night of that storm, she said, I saw a light flicker in Daniel's house, on, then off. Like someone bumped it, maybe. And she hesitated. There was a truck, big, dark one. It sat idling out front for a long while. I thought it was a delivery man. But who delivers in that weather? Her words chilled me. I asked her to repeat them, then urged her to tell the detectives herself. She agreed reluctantly, her thin hands shaking as she signed her name to the statement. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty towel hook, that flickering light, that truck breathing exhaust in the rain. The next day, I pressed the police to check the house again. Something was washed, I told them. The bleach smell, it wasn't normal. And the rug, it didn't just vanish. The detective tried to reassure me. We've already processed the scene, he said, but I shook my head. Not enough. Look deeper, please. My voice cracked. If they cleaned, they missed something. Maybe it was desperation in my eyes, or maybe it was the detail about the missing towel. But he relented. The team came back with portable kits. They didn't use the same tricks you see in movies. No blue glow in the dark. Instead, they brought handheld lamps and chemical sprays that made grout lines and drains tell their secrets. One tech ran a swab around the sink trap, then held it under the light. Another checked the tile edges where mop water settles. I stood back, my nails digging crescents into my palms. After a long silence, one of them looked up. His expression gave away what his voice tried to keep professional. There are traces in the drain, he said. Something washed through here recently. We'll need lab results. But it's not just cleaning solution. Another pointed at faint discoloration along the tile grout near the kitchen threshold. Someone scrubbed hard. Whatever it was, they tried to lift it out. The detective glanced at me, his jaw tight. He didn't say the word, but I heard it anyway. Blood. I wrapped my shawl tighter and looked around the kitchen. My son's home, once filled with Matthew's laughter and Daniel's tired but proud smile, was now a stage where someone had wiped away the story. Only they hadn't wiped it clean enough. I whispered to myself, too quiet for anyone else to hear. They washed what they couldn't erase. And in that moment, the first theory rooted in my mind, heavy and sharp, whoever had been here hadn't just taken Daniel. They had tried to scrub him out of existence, but the house still remembered. And so did I.